Africa, we are the children of Africa. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. African Muslims Agency has been helping millions of Muslims around Africa in poverty and also during times of disasters like drought and famine. Joining us to speak about the history of Africa Muslims Agency, we are joined by Brother Hafiz Imran Chonara, the National Director, Africa Muslims Agency and Direct Aid International. Assalamu alaikum, brother, and thank you for joining us.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah, Hassan. Thank you for having us on the program today, and welcome to all the viewers as well.
Jazakallah. Let's begin by speaking about the history of Africa Muslims Agency. Tell us, when was this organization founded and who founded it?
Well, actually, Hassan, the Africa Muslims Agency, or Direct Aid International, as it is also known around Africa, has been started almost 30 years ago right now. A brother by the name of Dr. Abdurrahman Sumait from Kuwait, actually, went to Africa many, many years ago, saw the need, and decided to go back and start an organization called Africa Muslims Agency, an agency helping Muslims in Africa. And then, of course, in 1987, now 26 years ago now roughly, he came to South Africa, met my late dad, Muhammad Farid Chunar, and asked him to start Africa Muslims Agency, Direct Aid International, here in South Africa, which has been operating for 26 years, alhamdulillah. But also, interestingly enough, and we talk about this Africa Muslims Agency, Direct Aid International. Let me just share a quick history on that. It started almost 30 years ago serving Muslims in Africa because he saw the need to help people who are poverty-stricken. But over the time, he realized also, and the staff and the people who run the African Muslims Agency, together with my dad at the time, understood that poverty and these kind of strifes in Africa don't just affect Muslims; it affects anybody. And so we termed it Direct Aid International. So in many, many countries around Africa, we are known as Direct Aid International, primarily simply because we run schools and hospitals and clinics, and all these kind of programs we do are not only designed for Muslims. Yes, there's an element of what we do that is specific to Muslims. But of course, there's a large chunk of what we do that is not specifically, that is open to anybody. And especially education and that kind of thing. So that's where this Direct Aid International Africa Muslims Agency term comes from. But maybe let me just share with you quickly the vision of Africa Muslims Agency and Direct Aid International. Really, it is to uplift the standard of life, the morality and education of the most deserving and the most needy across the continent of Africa. Now, what I'd like to say at this juncture also is that Africa Muslim Agency, Direct Aid International, one of the benefits we have in Africa, because we've been operating there for so long, and we're so well known amongst the United Nations, and we have in many of these countries we are recognized by having diplomatic status and good relationships with governments in these countries. We also are member organizations to many, many larger organizations that operate in Africa and that operate in the Middle East as well. So that's kind of a little bit of history. One thing I should say from the outset is the South African office started about 26 years ago, as I mentioned. Although we affiliated to the Kuwaiti office, although we are part of the larger organization, we don't get any funding from the larger organization. And that's an important point, because since 1987, we've always been funded locally through donors locally. Because often when we think about a Middle Eastern organization, we think the funding comes from there, but not so in South Africa.
Hafiz Imran, how many countries does Africa Muslims Agency and Direct Aid operate?
To date, we operate in 29 countries in Africa. We have 29 full-time officers in 29 different countries in Africa, with approximately, at the moment, last count was plus minus 4,000 full-time staff members across these 29 different offices, alhamdulillah. And that, I think, is an important point, because in some of these countries have been operating for 15, 20 years, some of them for almost 30 years right now, like Somalia, for example, close on 30 years. But the important point of that is this. We have 160 schools, for example, in Africa, 3 universities, many clinics, many hospitals, many eye clinics that move around Africa, mobile eye clinics. Now, the importance of having full-time officers, when you think about it logically, is that we can consistently give relief aid to a country, to a needy population. It's not just a one-time thing, it's a consistent basis. And that's the value of having that there, yes.
You've spoken about educational programs that you actually offer in Africa by having 3 universities, 160 schools, and also many clinics and hospitals. What other projects are you involved in Africa?
I think, Hassan, at this point, let me give you an overview. We can come to specifics later on, but let me give you an overview of projects. And I want to tie up here the South African office as well as Africa, because we operate together. I'm in Kuwait regularly because myself and the CEO of African Muslim Agency, Dar International, at the moment, we're in talks a lot about how to actually utilize our infrastructure in Africa and what can really be done with all these 160 schools, these universities, these clinics. How can we really take it to another level? So we talk a lot about that. So the South African office partners a lot with the Kuwaiti office in trying to utilize do our projects a lot better. But let me just share with you on both as an overview on both sides. I talked about 160 schools, 3 universities. In Somalia, for example, CIMAD University, plus minus 3,000 students there, one of the best run universities there, owned by African Muslim Agency, Direct Aid International. Tanzania, in the university there as well. But let me come back closer to home as well. Here in the South African office, a lot of our donors from Southern Africa will know this. We're very, very strong in digging water wells around Mozambique, Malawi, remote villages in Africa as well, in South Africa as well. We drill boreholes. We build classrooms, we build masajid, we build ibadat masjids, we build homes for the destitute. So the South African office, let me bring it closer to there. We're very involved in those kind of projects, and I'll give you specifics later on about numbers. But honestly, when you think about the value of digging a water well or drilling a borehole in a village where they have to walk 10 kilometers for water, when you think about putting 2 classrooms where children can now, instead of sitting under a tree, get into a building where they can learn something, and you provide some basic learning material. When you provide home for the destitute, the benefit of that, the ongoing benefit to that village is amazing when you really think about it. We build complexes in some of these villages in Malawi and Mozambique, and that all comes from the South African office. And that all comes from the South African donors, when you really think about it, because that's 100% where the funding comes from for the project that the South African office runs.
You have a leadership institute in South Africa. I think it's south of Johannesburg. Briefly tell us about this leadership institute and what does it aim to actually achieve over a long period of time?
Well, some people may have visited already, called the Al-Furqan Islamic Center. We're now terming the Center for Excellence. Basically, Al-Furqan Islamic Center started in Grasmere, south of Joburg, many years ago now. It started out as an orphanage. We still have a few orphans that are there as well. It started as an orphanage where we wanted to create an environment where we could find young people and help them develop to their maximum potential. And when you think about orphans and they don't have a place to go, often they are left by themselves. So really when you think about it, so Al-Furqan Islamic Center, over the years we've got many graduates out of that center. One of them is a gentleman who's now based in Cape Town, whose brother called Ishaq Likhanya. He was an orphan. He came from a local township here in South Africa, came to the center, became a Muslim, went to primary school, high school, went to university, went to college in Zanzibar, eventually went to university in Malaysia, qualified as a psychologist, of course, also in Islamic studies as well. He's now based in Cape Town. That's just one example.
Hafiz Imran, that's a very good project that African Muslims Agency is involved in, especially on creating sustainable development for the youth and for the country at large. Well, we're going for a short ad break, and inshallah when we come back, Hafiz Imran will continue telling us more about the Leadership Institute and more of the history and activities of African Muslims Agency.
Africa, we are the children of Africa. Africa, we are the children of Africa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome back from that commercial break. We've been speaking about Africa Muslims Agency, an organization that has been helping people on the African continent for over 30 years. And with me in studio is Hafiz Imran Chonara, National Director, African Muslims Agency and Direct Aid International. Assalamu alaikum, brother, and welcome back.
Alaikum assalam, Hassan.
We were speaking about the Al-Furqan Leadership Institute before we went for the ad break. Would you briefly wind up for us that discussion?
Well, actually, the Al-Furqan Islamic Center or Center for Excellence right now, and we're in the process currently of actually taking that to another level right now. That's just one of the projects that we developed. We're very focused on that in South Africa right now as a strong point for us right now, because we believe that that's the next wave, is developing young leaders. But anyway, that's just one of the projects that we have. What I'd maybe like to cover right now, I think it's important as well, is just to share with our viewers, is just to give some maybe more specifics. We talked earlier a little bit about an overview of the history of AMA and Direct Aid International. Let me give a little bit more specifics, because I think sometimes it's important to understand what we actually do on the ground. So let me run through a few things. I'll run through maybe based on South Africa, and then based also in Africa as well. I'll start with the African side, and I'll come back to local side, because I think that'll be of important, that'll be good value to us. I'm going to run through a couple of stats here, Hassan, just very brief overview here. An example of some of the projects that we've done and continue to do, and maybe people want to get involved on some level. Number one, we distribute about 7 million copies of the Quran in Arabic and in many African languages. Because obviously when you build these schools and you build madrasas, that is a necessity. You know, over this almost 30 years now, we've sponsored almost 50,000 orphans through the different orphanages we run. We've got about 840 educational facilities. Right? Earlier I said 160 schools and 840 educational facilities. Now you wonder what 840 educational facilities actually mean. It means that in a village, if you have students under a tree, children, and you put them into a classroom, that becomes an educational facility. So besides the 160 schools, you look at all these little small, what we would call educational facility. Someone being educated in a small environment. You know, more than 500,000 male and female students have studied through our schools and through the universities over the 30 years. 150,000 needy students get their academic fees paid through Direct Aid International African Muslim Agency around Africa. Plus minus about 700 different scholarships for postgraduate studies. Now when you think about that kind of thing, it blows your mind. When you talk about 150 medical camps. When I say medical camp, it doesn't mean a clinic. We've got clinics as well, yes. But it's not a full-fledged clinic. When you talk about medical camp, you're having a camp for a specific treatment. Maybe it's an eye disease, maybe eye treatment, maybe this, maybe that. And they have it in different rural parts of Africa, of course. We sponsor 2,000 instructors. When I say instructors, instructing when it comes to teachers. And in these educational facilities, you may not call somebody a teacher necessarily because they may not be qualified as a teacher in one of these small educational facilities, but they may be an instructor of some sort. Now, this is really, really interesting when you think about it, because about 500,000 tons of relief aid has been given to different parts of Africa. Now, when you try to conceptualize that, and when I say 500,000 tons, just think about Darfur in Sudan a few years ago. Just think about Somalia in 1992. Just think about Somalia 2 years ago. Think about Mozambique floods a number of years ago. Mozambique floods now 2 months ago. When you put all of that together, when you really think about the capacity of what Direct Aid International African Muslim Agency have done, that really, I think, excites me to some degree because it shows the value of what's happening on the ground. But let me give you a couple of more things. Let's just wrap this up to give you some specifics on this here. This is interesting as well, actually. We signed, and this I think on an intellectual level, it's valuable. We signed many agreements with United Nations, with many other organizations. We believe in partnering with organizations. We believe that we can't do everything. No organization, I believe, with my heart of hearts, can do everything. No organization can be the only one that does everything. It's not possible. The need is too great. So we always believe in partnering and networking with other organizations because we're not the only one. We can't be. Many people do good work, alhamdulillah. In Somalia 2 years ago, many organizations did phenomenal work. And put together, it alleviates the crisis. But I think, just talking about Africa, one of the things I want to talk about in Africa, and Direct Aid International African Muslim Agency, we feel very strongly about this. Recently in the Forbes Middle East, they rated Direct Aid International African Muslim Agency as one of the most transparent organizations, charitable organization. And that's important in today's day and age. It's very important for donors to understand it. Very, very critical, right? Now, I want to wrap up on the Africa thing and then come back to South Africa. On the Africa thing, one thing we've done that we feel strongly about is the sustainable programs we talked about earlier. Let me give you an example of Somalia. We've been operating there for almost 30 years right now, so we have people on the ground, obviously, regularly. So when there's a crisis, we're always there. We have the educational facilities. But in this recent crisis 2 years ago, before the global media hit Somalia, before it became a media sensation, if I want to call it that, a few months before that already, we had already started feeding centers. Why? Because we have staff there. They know when the drought is happening. They know when there's famine. They can see it. It's evident. And we started. And of course, when it became a bottleneck, when it became a pressure point, global media arrived there, which is important because it exposed it to the world. And relief organizations flooded in there, which was brilliant. But when it stops being a media sensation, because maybe there's other crises in the world, which is normal, the benefit we have is that we still have our guys on the ground. So many organizations come in to relieve the pressure, which is very welcome. But after that, we have programs like repatriation programs. Because think about it, when the media leaves, doesn't mean people stop dying. Doesn't mean people stop needing food. They still need. And you can't give them food for 1 or 2 months in a refugee camp in Dadaab, for example, or somewhere in Mogadishu. You can't give them food for 1 or 2 months and leave them. You have to have something that goes beyond that. So we have repatriation programs, resettlement programs. We have grain banks, food banks, where we can give people grain to go back to their farms, to start farming again. That's important. But that's the Africa side. Let me give you South Africa, Southern Africa, which is closer to home, obviously. We have many projects here. Some specifics about these projects. Let me give you just a couple of things. I mean, when you think about this, we've got Ramadan programs, we've got winter programs, which is a normal thing, which happens all the time. So we feed the fasting in Ramadan. We feed hundreds of thousands of people in South Africa, Mozambique and Malawi over Ramadan. Winter time is now. We clothe thousands of people with blankets, gloves, scarves, hats, and a few food items as well through our winter programs as well. That's here in South Africa. That's Muslims and non-Muslims. Then Qurbani comes, of course, in a few months' time. There we do Qurbani here locally in South Africa, in Mozambique and Malawi as well. Now let me give you specifics, and let's wrap this maybe up on this kind of point of your question on project specifics. The South African donors have, over the last number of years, we've donated 3,029 water wells just in Mozambique, Malawi, and South Africa. Right? Boreholes, about 258 boreholes, right? And in Mozambique, Malawi, and in South Africa. Ibadat masjids, 263. Masjids, 183 masjids. 399 homes for the destitute. But think about 3,000 water wells. And I want to leave it at this point. 3,000 water wells that the local South African donors have benefited villages in Mozambique, Malawi, and South Africa that will give them the reward for ongoing. I want to leave it at that point. Shukran.
Jazakallah, Brother Imran, for expounding more about the activities of African Muslims Agency. I see you're involved in a lot of beneficial projects, and I think donors out there, inshallah, will continue supporting you. Let's go for a quick ad break, inshallah, and when we come back, we shall continue speaking to Brother Imran, the National Director, Africa Muslims Agency and Direct Aid International.
Africa, we are the children of Africa. Africa, we are the children of Africa.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. We are speaking about the history of African Muslims Agency and the activities they conduct throughout the African continent and here in South Africa. With me in studio is Brother Hafiz Imran Chonara, National Director, African Muslims Agency and Direct Aid International. Assalamu alaikum, brother, and welcome back.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
You've shared a lot of information about the activities African Muslims Agency is involved in, and you've also given us some specifics. Would you tell us more about some of the projects you're involved in and any information you'd like to share with the viewers?
Well, Hassan, I think we left off just before the break about some of the stats of the water wells and some of the projects we do here locally in South Africa. I want to maybe just wrap this up by talking about how people can get involved. Because I think, normally it's one thing sharing all the information, it's one thing sharing, but how does it actually come together? It actually doesn't mean anything unless we actually have some donor base, unless we actually have people who want to get involved. And yes, we have the 4,000 full-time staff members in Africa. But of course, all of that really comes together when you think about it, because there's a need, people feel the need, people see the need, and people respond to that need. So I want to just pick up again on the water well thing and the projects and that. I mean, I'm going to give you now specifics about how people get involved in different things. You'll see on the screen, you'll have our donors can donate through our website. Our office details are there. Our bank account details are there as well. So they're welcome to donate to different projects. Now, of course, people wonder, well, how can I make a great impact? Maybe I only got a few rands, maybe I only got a little bit more, maybe I got a lot. It depends. Where is the best place to put it? How do we actually define that for people? Well, if you think about it, there's projects, and I want to share this with you, which I think is important. We also have a program whereby we can actually tailor-make someone's giving, so to speak, their charitable giving. And alhamdulillah, the donors of South Africa are very big-hearted people. It doesn't matter what goes on in the world economic crisis and global financial crisis. We've found from African Muslim Agency Data International that people are giving more. And again, it comes down to people understanding that the more they give, the more comes back to them, inshallah, in this world and the year after, inshallah. And there's a few sides to that. So we have a plan whereby we can actually tailor-make someone's giving. If someone says, I want to give the whole year through, how do I do that? We can sit down with them and say, okay, well, how much would you like to give? And then we tailor-make it. Okay, winter is coming up. How much money would you like to allocate towards winter? Towards winter here in South Africa. We know how cold it gets here in South Africa. And of course, then we can say, okay, Ramadan's coming up. Okay, how much of your money? Of course, there you're looking at zakah and those kind of things, because specifically for Muslims, again, on the zakah, on Ramadan. And we say, how much would you like to give towards Ramadan and your fitrah, those kind of things. Then we look at qurbani, or udhiyah as we call it, the qurbani program we have locally as well. How much would you like to allocate there? But remember, the rest of the year, sometimes we forget this, that if there's someone's in need, often they're not only in need winter time, they're not only in need Ramadan time, they're not only in need qurbani time. I mean, if somebody is really poverty stricken, it affects them the whole year through. If there's a village in Mozambique, and I should say this, I went to Mozambique a few months ago, and in the north of Mozambique, where we operate in the Zambezia province, I mean, I flew from here to Maputo, then I went from Maputo to Kilimani, which is a 2-hour flight later. Then I got there in a 4x4 and drove 7 hours into the bush. Then you can't go anymore, so you get off the 4x4 and you go by bicycle, and then you walk a little bit further, because that's how you get there. And when you're walking through jungle, or you there with the 4x4 and you see, a village of people, and they tell you through interpreters that they have to walk 5-6 kilometers for water, and that's their everyday thing. That's every single day they do that if they want water. That's not Ramadan time only. They do that every single day, whenever they need water for that village. And when you think of a donor here in South Africa who can pay 9,500 rand, that's what it would cost to dig a water well in that area, and you put a water well in that village. Can you imagine the sadaqah jariyah? Can you imagine the ongoing reward for that person to put a water well in that village to benefit that community? So we do water wells in Mozambique. I mean, in Mozambique, just to give you specific stats here, we've done 1,824 water wells that South Africans have donated to villages in Mozambique, and 9,500 rand per water well. We do boreholes. In Malawi, we've done 1,200 water wells. Boreholes in Malawi, specifically 211 boreholes in Malawi, we've done just over the last couple of years now. A borehole is a longer standing structure. We drill a borehole. It costs about 28,000 rand to a donor here in South Africa. And there you have a pump and everything that gives water, it brings out water to that village. The unbelievable benefit to humanity you're giving by doing that. Then we've got masjids. Some people like to donate towards masjids, towards building a masjid. A masjid, they can build a masjid for 95,000 rand at the moment, a proper face brick structure. And we encourage our donors to come with us to these areas, to visit their projects, to see their water well, drink water out of it, see the masjid, make salah in it. Ibadat masjid from about 45,000 rand roughly, which is a smaller masjid. We have classrooms. We have whole complexes. You'll be surprised. Many donors in South Africa, from every part of South Africa, have donated complexes. What do you mean a complex? A complex is a masjid, a home for the muallim. We've got 2 classrooms, we've got toilets, we've got wudu facility, we've got a borehole. All of that on the same premises, nice walled premises. It becomes a center for that community. And it becomes a sense of pride for that community to have a center where they can go to and they can grow and learn from. So those are specific projects. That costs 219,000 rand, for example. And we have many of our donors from around the country who go with us to go visit their project or open up the masjid when it's ready to be opened up. But besides that, you can ongoingly give money towards our project for leadership development. That's an ongoing thing. You can give money ongoing for our winter, for Ramadan coming up, for Qurbani, and for feeding programs that we have regularly. Floods we had 2 months ago in Mozambique. One of our donors went with us to Mozambique, where we went with truckloads of food there as well. So those kind of things, that's how people can get involved. We want people to donate. Without donating, we can't do this work. And I often say that Allah has just blessed us to be able to allow us to serve the poor people. We're not doing the poor people a favor by giving our money. The poor people are doing us a favor by allowing us to serve them, because we get reward in the process. So it's a benefit to the donors. So I want to appeal to the donors. I really want to appeal to the viewers today that you can contact our offices here in our Joburg office, our Durban office, our Cape Town office, our Lenasia office. You can contact the office by the number you see on the screen. You can donate by the account details you see on the screen, or find it out from the office as well. Our website address is there as well. You can donate online if you really want to. But without your donations, we cannot do what we do. We are all just tools in the process. We need the donations, we need the donors to come together. And if they have other ideas as well, to come to us and say, this is another idea we have. And how can we get involved? We work a lot with students as well. Students are trying to get involved. One thing I'm impressed about the community is that people are very forward thinking. People understand that we have to get involved in this poverty alleviation thing. We cannot just ignore it forever. It doesn't just go away by itself. So alhamdulillah, that's kind of where we are at the moment. And I want to encourage donors, please get involved. please call our office, please donate online, because honestly the reward you will get for you and your family, and may Allah bless you and may Allah bless your businesses with abundance inshallah by donating even a little bit. Because may Allah bless you and bless also the deceased, because you can give sadaqah jariyah for someone who's passed on as well, and the reward can go to them inshallah in perpetuity. So I want to encourage donors to do that. And I want to say one last closing point is thank you to our donors in South Africa. Because remember, as we know, مَنْ لَمْ يَشْكُرِ النَّاسِ لَمْ يَشْكُرِ اللَّهِ. One who does not thank man appropriately cannot thank Allah appropriately. And I want to say thank you, because our donors for over almost 26 years in South Africa has been supporting us, and almost 30 years in Africa. Shukran. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah for coming to studio. That was Brother Imran, Hafiz Imran, the National Director, Africa Muslims Agency and Direct Aid International, speaking to us about some of the projects done by Africa Muslims Agency and Direct Aid International. He expounded on a number of issues, and he appeals to donors, inshallah, to support their projects. And indeed, they're doing a great work, not only in South Africa and Southern Africa, but also on the entire African continent. From me, Hassan Isla, and the entire team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah. From Mauritania to Ethiopia, from Tunisia to Somalia, we are the children of Africa. La ilaha illallah, la ilaha illallah.